Thanks for attending our presentation from San Jose Water. We're going to be presenting implementing HxGN EAM using the change management model, ADKAR. My name is Quang. I usually go by Q though, and this is my coworker.
Hi, my name is Darien.
And I'm the senior system analyst. I was actually there from beginning to end for implementing EAM at San Jose Water. It was a really nice journey for me because this is actually a career switch for me. I actually never even knew EAM before I started. So our agenda will be covering, broken up to 4 different parts. First is to introduce everyone to what San Jose Water is, our first implementation with our operations department, and what ADKAR is. And finally, how we implemented ADKAR on our largest department, which is the distribution systems department. San Jose Water was established in 1866. We provide water service to over 1 million people in the Northern California region. It's in a little small area called Silicon Valley. Some small companies like NVIDIA, Apple, they are all located. We service Apple. We covered about 4 cities, and plus some small water supply municipals, which cover the unincorporated area of California. Through that, we cover about 178 square miles. We have 3 water treatment plants, which provide drinking water, and also we cover about 2,400 miles of pipes. The first department we did implementation for was our operations department. The reason we chose our operations department first was because they handle primarily our internal assets. That's important for us because if EAM was to kind of cause a pause or a slowdown in work, it would not affect our ability to provide water to our customers because we have built-in redundancies. So if for whatever reason EAM wasn't working and a station was pretty much disabled, we could easily transfer it to a redundant system. Operations is also uses the exact same tools as our largest department, distribution. So that provides us a good department to use as a prototype. So any lessons learned, any problems we face in operations was most likely going to happen in distributions. But with using operations first, we'll have a solution ready when it does appear in distribution. When we did our implementation, we assumed that any problems we saw in operations would be the exact same as distribution, but just at a larger scale. And also operations was also our smallest department, so it was able to be managed with the initial team, because originally when we did our first implementation, we only had 2 people. When we did our distributions, we scaled it up to 4. Our operations department is broken up to 3 end user groups. The supervisor that manages everyone in the department, which is about 4 people. Our crew trucks who do all the correct work order based on the inspection and preventive maintenance of our technicians. The reason why we did implement EAM was because we used an old work order management system called WAM, Work Order and Utility Management Systems. That program was 20 plus years old. Oracle had actually retired it about 7 years ago, and the individual at San Jose Water that was maintaining it retired about 2 years ago. So for a good 2 years, it got handed to me. After a lot of fighting, I was like, all right, I don't know what this is. To give you context of how old the system was, I needed to use Internet Explorer to get it to work. So that's how old and unsupported that system was. We went live with EAM on December 2nd, 2021. And the reason why we did it was because we wanted system reliability, digital transformation, and data collection, plus much more. Some highlights of our implementation process was that in the pre-project groundwork, we gained awareness of challenges and issues through interviewing and job shouting of our operations department. That was very extensive. Even though it seems like we're IT, we actually were out in the field, PPE, out in the rain. We also wanted to see what things were happening when it was bad weather, just to see how the application would work in their actual real work usage. And we also discussed ideas with the operation members, both crew trucks, supervisors, and technicians, to see what they envision once we implemented EAM, like what did they want to get out of it? What did they want to benefit from it? And it was also very insightful because they provide a lot of good ideas, but they weren't really tech savvy. So it was a very useful exercise for me to translate all those ideas and then translate the tech thing. And it also helped buy-in from operations because they saw the results. Even though they didn't understand how we got there, they were impressed we got there. So like, they were like, oh, okay, it works. It made my life easier, so there was a lot of easy buy-in for operations. In addition, we also began speaking to the IT system owners. Even though we're pretty IT heavy, we're actually under the planning department in engineering. So there are a lot of functionalities of EAM that's still under the ownership of IT. The initial development of EAM, since this was our first run, took 4 years. A majority of that time was actually creating the naming and structural hierarchy of San Jose Water's assets, and also just reviewing the Excel sheets to import it using the import utility tool that was under Infor. We haven't used it in a while, so I don't know if it's still there, because we kind of now use Ion and API to transfer everything in, rather than using the Excel. And then finally, the integration with IT, we still kept the responsibilities of the relational database system and the Amazon Web Services on IT. Anything that deals with the application was pushed to us. Things like flex business rules, monitoring the relational database, refreshing the servers, and updating any type of mass ETLs. We did have some outcomes and lessons learned from our first implementation. One positive outcome was that by performing the interviews and job shadowing, it allowed for a quicker adoption of HxGN EAM, and it also provided a lot less resistance from the old system WAM. Kind of reiterate, a lot of our operations staff was not really tech savvy. They're mostly working out in the field with their hands. So initially when we did the first implementation, we thought there would be a lot of resistance, a lot of struggle, but because we did a lot of prep work before go live, it was actually very seamless. I think I spent 4 days just being at the ready, dropping everything, waiting for calls, just crickets. So it was like a win, but also kind of unexpected. So I didn't really do much for 4 days, so positive. But hopefully my manager doesn't see this. We did have some lessons learned in that our team was very technical, had a lot of good technical skills, but we didn't really have a lot, like change management wasn't our primary skills. And what we found when we did interviews and shadowing after the job was done was that we didn't do it in, I think, the best method. So we had a lot of times where we discovered new things that seemed like out of order, so we had to always confidently go back and to kind of revise the implementation plan. It increased prep time. It kind of caused us to have unexpected issues, which in hindsight, we think we would have found out if we followed the proper change management procedure. A positive outcome we found was that with HxGN EAM was we are now able to collect data that San Jose Water has never collected before, which did impress a lot of the leadership, is that we can now offer, before with WAM, we could only track when a work order was done and how long it took. With EAM, we're now able to provide that same data, plus asset management conditioning. Because now we provide where the asset is, details of the asset, and then allowing our end users to update those assets and have them take more ownership of it. It also provides accuracy because they're actually in the field looking at what is on site compared to, say, an engineer looking at it just from an as-built plan. And a lesson learned, which really kind of resulted in us wanting to adopt a formal change management methodology, was that when we did our UAT, we followed our consultant standard, which they applied to all of their end users. For our case, it was a week. We found that a week of user acceptance testing to not be sufficient. When we went through the UAT, we thought we covered everything, but when we went to go live, there was a lot of issues that showed up that we had to fix and resolve in the first 3 weeks. Things that I feel like would have been caught at the UAT, things that in theory and technically is enhancements, but really they were fixes. Very small things like the timing of the preventive maintenance, when it got sent out, the scale of the preventive maintenance. Like, for example, one preventive maintenance we had, initially we thought it was a good idea. to have it at a fixed repeatability, but then what happened was that they accumulate too many work orders. So we had to convert a lot of PMs back to variable. And if we had a longer UAT, we probably would have caught that on, but because of the 1 week, because we only had 1 week, they didn't realize that the fix would kind of like accumulate duplicate work orders. And we decided to adopt the change management methodology from ProSci. This is their definition of what change management is for them. It's the application of a structured process instead of tools for leading the people side of change to achieve a desired outcome. ADKAR is an acronym for awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcements. And through that model, ProSci breaks it up to a 3-phase process. The 3-phase process from phase 1 to 3 are prepared approach, manage change, and sustain outcomes. In the prepare approach, we define what we want to see in the success of our implementation. And we also want to define clearly what we want our impact to be, and also define how we want to approach the implementation. And in the manage change, we plan our action plan and track how that implementation plan is working, and most importantly, being able to adapt it to the change based on the response from our end users. And then finally, for ProSci's process is sustain outcomes. We want to review the performance of our implementation and also transfer more ownership to the end users, teaching them how to use the app and troubleshoot the apps on themselves, which Darien will cover in our on implementing HxGN EAM for distribution system under the ADKAR system.
Thank you, Quang. So I'm going to kind of first start off with a brief high-level overview of our distribution systems department. We commonly refer to them as the DS department. So our DS department is our largest department at San Jose Water. They have approximately 80+ employees, and they are running a 24/7 operation. Their main goal and main job is to essentially maintain our approximately 20,000 fire hydrants and 500,000 plus pipes, valves, and assortment of other assets. So we utilize ADKAR as the change management method to essentially successfully achieve these goals. These are not all the goals that we had. These are just the main ones that we had. So the first goal that we got achieved was essentially the transfer of all of their paper processes over to a digital process. The next one was pretty much implementing mobile devices for all of the users. So they were no longer using paper, and they were just all on their phones, which at work is kind of ironic. The next one is the automation of processes. So automating any of their more mundane processes, and then bringing in integrations of the customer information system into EAM, as well as the GIS system into EAM. We also developed custom checklists to guide their workflows and data collection, and started to implement some changes and responsibilities to their workflows and responsibilities. So the first step of ADKAR is the awareness stage. We pretty much brought awareness to the changes that we were making to DS's department. And of course, there was a lot of users who were very unsure of these changes and were just not too used to a brand new system coming in and them trying to learn it. So some of the main questions that they were asking is pretty much like, why are we doing this change? And how we answered that was the WAM software that they were using was no longer being supported. The next one is, why are we doing the changes now? And with that, we answered that with saying that the WAM system was actually starting to accumulate issues. And as those issues started to accumulate, the AMS team could not actually fully support and resolve those issues. As Q was saying, we didn't have any background in the WAM system. And unfortunately, the software was pretty much retired by the developers, so we couldn't rely on the developers to assist us with any of those issues. And the final main question that they kept asking is, what if we don't actually switch to this new software and just stay on WAM? It might be broken, but it's something they knew. What we kind of emphasized on that is that the current system has a lot of issues and it keep accumulating those issues, and because it was accumulating it actually started to affect their efficiency and their workflows. And so we explained to them that if we maintain the system and the status quo, they would all essentially be sitting around twiddling their thumbs. And that was the end of the awareness section. So when we moved into the desire section, we explained to them the changes in the workflows and the processes that we were implementing. Some of the main ones that we changed was the removing of all of their paper processes and also changing some of their responsibilities. For the changing of the responsibilities for the crew leaders, a lot of them really didn't like that as much, so we had to essentially express to them kind of the benefits of these changes. So the one aspect that we kind of expressed that was a benefit was that when we changed it over to a digital process, we actually optimized some of their workflows. Their original workflow required them to fill out paper copies. As you can see, there is a paper copy of our work order form right there. And they had to fill those out and then submit them at the end of the day. And if they had any pictures, such as pictures of the job or just pictures of parts or pictures of documents that they actually had to email those separately from their actual submission of their work. So what we did is, with this new system, now we were able to integrate all of their pictures and all of the information and all of it into the single EAM system. So that means that they no longer had to submit pictures separately, and they also didn't have to essentially notify the clerks of any additional changes or anything else, as they had full access to make some of those changes as they were doing the work order. The next benefit that we expressed was the automations of their more mundane processes. So one of the automations I can think of right now is the automation for auto-creating a follow-up work order based upon the checklist selections for our preventive maintenance schedules. When our inspectors go out, they do fill out these checklists, and how the original process worked is they would fill out the checklist and they would notify either a clerk or a supervisor saying, hey, I need a follow-up work order on this specific hydrant, and it needs to say this, this, and this. With this automation, they no longer had to do that. Now, all they have to do is fill in the checklist, select the appropriate work order type that they needed to have a correction made from, and it will auto-create that work order for them. Now, to kind of go over kind of what this picture is kind of showing is, it is the conversion of the paper processes into a digital process. And as you can see on the paper process here, there are a lot of checklist items on there. A lot of those checklist items aren't actually filled out purely because they don't need to use those for that work order type. When we converted it over to a digital process, we essentially cleaned out all the unnecessary work order type or work order checklist items for each work order type, so that now it's more streamlined and they no longer had to figure out how they were going to filter through all the checklist items to find the correct ones to fill out. The next stage is the knowledge stage. At this point, when we were teaching the crew leaders and the clerks and the inspectors, we encountered some difficulties with the users just not understanding how a mobile device actually works. Some of them are really old school and, yeah, prefer paper over anything else. So they didn't really understand mobile work devices. They also had a lot of trouble understanding the applications and how to essentially navigate through the EAM application. So what we did in this stage was we created task-focused job helps based upon the different features within EAM. We also created specific standard operating procedures to be more easily read and understood. And we also had extensive in-classroom trainings and practice sessions. Now, these in-classroom trainings focused on each specific feature within EAM that we were implementing for the crew leaders. So a couple examples of some of these classroom trainings would be a classroom training for purely just filling out the checklists, one for filling out book labor, one for explaining how the automations are affecting them, and another one for how the mobile work orders workflow was changing. And actually, an example of a job help that we actually created to help them understand the changes in the mobile work orders is actually up here, where we kind of outline the different steps to go through, starting from the very beginning of them getting into a work order, going through, filling out all the different information, filling out the checklist, setting the statuses, and then eventually filling out any closing codes and closing the work order. Now, the other thing that we did in this stage was we actually created an extended user acceptance testing period, where with ops, we had the 1 week. With DS, we extended it out to 8 weeks. And what this actually allowed us to do is it allowed us to identify areas of concern that the users had, as well as identify any bugs or problems within the system that we didn't capture on the first go-through that we had. So the next stage of ADKAR is the ability stage. At the ability stage, we actually allow the users into our prod environment, and they began to essentially work on their normal workflows and work on actual work orders that they were doing in the field. While they were doing these, we actually shadowed them and helped them answer any questions, any confusions that they had, and any issues that they had right then and there. Now, what this does is actually gives confidence to our crew leaders and our field users in what they were learning in the classroom, as well as gives them the knowledge that they are fully supported in the development of this system and that we weren't going to essentially release the system and abandon them. So what these two things do is actually help to build a lot of good rapport with them, as building that kind of good rapport with them is extremely vital down the road for when issues start to occur, if issues do occur. The last step is the reinforcement step. In this step, we used a JIRA ticket system to gain information on all of the issues that were popping up. And this actually allowed us to essentially identify all of the trends in all of the support tickets we were receiving so that we could analyze them and figure out if we needed to do a general follow-up learning session with all of the users, or if we needed to target specific users who had specific problems on different aspects of the application. An example of one of those areas that we actually had an issue with is the activities workflow. And as you can see up here, we have a activities cheat sheet, which is the job help we actually gave to them in a in-classroom training that we had as a follow-up to everyone in this stage. So kind of how this activities cheat sheet works is when we explained it to them, we brought them into an in-classroom session and we explained to them that these are essentially all of the activities that you will need to be touching, as the rest of them will be touched by the clerks or the supervisors. And we also explained to them the order of operations for when these should be completed and what their final statuses are when they are to be considered completed. So some key takeaways that you can bring out of this is you need to understand the technological ability of your users when bringing them over from a pen and paper process over to a fully digital process. Now, this also works with old software to new software, as well as any new old workflows to new workflows. The next takeaway is you want to scale your UAT timeframe to match the size and complexity of your department. The third key takeaway is to pretty much emphasize the why the changes are occurring in the very beginning during your awareness and desire stages. So users are more open to the changes when you bring those up. And then as you go through the process, you always want to document as you go, just so that you understand how the old processes worked, as well as how the new processes are affecting those old processes, and what changes and optimizations those new processes made. And the sixth is to always want to gain good rapport with the users so that they are more open to when issues happen and are open to telling you those issues are occurring rather than trying to keep them hidden. And this allows you to resolve all of these issues in a timely fashion. And that concludes our presentation.